And, and to help refresh what chapter 12 is about, which is quite a well-known passage, really, we're going to actually see this acted out dramatically in a video as we've been doing, but it's a video that isn't just acted, it is actually the words from scripture that he used. So let's have a listen to this and a watch of it.
They kept looking for Jesus. And as they stood in the temple courts, they asked one another, "What do you think? Isn't he coming to the festival at all?" But the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone who found out where Jesus was should report it, so that they might arrest him. Six days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about half a liter of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. "Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages." He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. "Leave her alone," Jesus replied. "It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me." Meanwhile, a large crowd of Jews found out that Jesus was there and came not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans to kill Lazarus as well, for on account of him, many of the Jews were going over to Jesus and believing in him. Now there were some Greeks among those who went up to worship at the festival. They came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, with a request. "Sir," they said, "we would like to see Jesus." Philip went to tell Andrew. Andrew and Philip, in turn, told Jesus. Jesus replied, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Very truly I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. Anyone who loves their life will lose it, while anyone who hates their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Whoever serves me must follow me, and where I am, my servant also will be. My Father will honor the one who serves me. Now my soul is troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? No. It was for this very reason I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name." Then a voice came from heaven. "I have glorified it, and will glorify it again." The crowd that was there and heard it said it had thundered. Others said an angel had spoken to him. Jesus said, "This voice was for your benefit, not mine. Now is the time for judgment on this world. Now the prince of this world will be driven out. And I, when I am lifted up from the earth, would draw all people to myself." He said this to show the kind of death he was going to die. The crowd spoke up. We have heard from the law that the Messiah will remain forever. So how can you say the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man? Then Jesus told them, you are going to have the light just a little while longer. Walk while you have the light, before darkness overtakes you. Whoever walks in the dark does not know where they are going. Believe in the light while you have the light, so that you may become children of light. When he had finished speaking, Jesus left and hid himself from them.
Well, I wonder what caught your attention as we watched and listened to that video presentation of John chapter 12. What caught my attention was Mary anointing Jesus' feet. And particularly when John writes, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. It was something that I guess I tried to imagine the smell of the whole room, the whole house that they were in as they were having that meal, being filled with the perfume of the nard perfume that Mary had anointed Jesus' feet with. This morning we're going to re-examine John 12 using our noses to see if we can identify all of the fragrances and any fumes that fill the room from what the people say and do through this Bible passage. We're going to re-examine John 12 as if we were a perfumer. I wonder if you've heard of that role before, somebody who's a perfumer. I had to look up Wikipedia to find out what a perfumer is. Because you might not have, because I'd never heard of that profession before. A perfumer is an expert at creating perfume compositions. A perfumer is sometimes referred to affectionately as a nose, because of their fine sense of smell, for their ability to put together different compounds and be able to identify the individual smells and fragrances and be able to put them together in a way that's going to smell really nice when they're all put together as a perfume. A traditional perfumer works at what's called a perfume organ. Kent will be interested in this. Oh, it looks a bit like our organ, doesn't it? But those aren't musical notes there. Those are little bottles containing the different individual fragrances of the many different compounds that can go into mixing up a beautiful perfume. The perfume organ is where the perfumer selects and mixes various ingredients to make a new perfume. And once the perfumer is satisfied with the fragrance of the new perfume that they've developed, the perfumer then must choose a name for it. And you might be familiar with some of these names. Names like Chanel No. 5, Chloe. Sorry, Chanel No. 5, isn't it? Not Chanel No. 5. Chanel No. 5, Chloe, Calvin Klein, Obsession, Elizabeth Taylor, White Diamonds, and Opium. These are just some of the well-known, famous perfumes that you can go out and buy at a perfume store. So our task this morning as a perfumer, because that's what we're going to kind of be, will be to identify the various smells and fragrances emitted by the different characters of John chapter 12 that we've just had a listen to and a watch of. We're going to differentiate between fragrances that fill the room and fumes that clear the room. And once we've identified the fragrance or fume, our next job as a perfumer will be to give it a name that describes this fragrance that we've just smelled. So you probably haven't ever smelled your way through a Bible passage before. I know I've never done that before, but we're going to have a go at doing that this morning. So to help us get into our role as a perfumer, I thought we'd light some, hopefully this lights. Whoa, it worked before. Here we go. We're going to light some scented candles along the way. I'm not sure whether these will fill the room because this is a pretty big room to fill, but I'll probably get to smell it anyway. Maybe the front row or two will get to smell the fragrance coming off these perfumed candles, just to help us get in this mood of being a perfumer, smelling our way through John chapter 12. My nose has already caught the scent of the most obvious fragrance in John chapter 12, which is the sweet smell of nard, a very expensive perfume from northern India. Mary had in her hands a half-litre bottle of pure nard worth, it says, 300 denarii, which is worth the equivalent of 1 year's pay for a farm labourer back then. Put it into today's terms, and that would be about 50,000 New Zealand dollars would be the value in today's dollars of this half litre of nard that she just poured out on Jesus' feet. So you can imagine the gasps, can't you, of astonishment as Mary cracked open the seal and poured out not just a few little drops onto Jesus' feet, but in fact poured the whole bottle out over his feet. And according to Mark's gospel, which is just a parallel version of this, she pours it all over his head as well. And then she begins wiping his feet with her hair. All the while, the perfume's beautiful aroma is wafting up through the air, filling the room, filling the whole house, for everybody in it to smell this beautiful smell of nard, the sweet fragrance. Now, I had difficulty when I had to think, well, what would be a modern-day illustration of what Mary has just done that might help us understand the significance of what she's doing? And all I could come up with was this story that really only partially describes what was going on. So here it goes. A university student named Sam fell in love with another student named Jane, but he'd been too shy to tell her how he felt about her. Eventually, in the last week of their final semester of their concluding year at university, Sam plucked up enough courage to ask Jane out to dinner at an expensive restaurant. And she said yes. However, because of his shyness, Sam decides that rather than telling Jane how he feels, he will show his love for her by giving her an expensive bottle of perfume. Sam wears his smartest clothes out for the dinner, and Jane wears a beautiful new dress that she's just bought for her graduation. After the waiter had cleared the last of the dishes away at the end of their tasty meal, Sam brings out his gift. Jane's eyes widen as she opens the package and sees the bottle of Calvin Klein Obsession inside. Sam looks nervously for any hint of a reaction at his not too subtle gift that he'd just given her. Leaning towards Sam with a twinkle in her eye, Jane invites Sam to put some perfume on her neck. His heart beating wildly, Sam opens the bottle, but as he leans forward to do so, he accidentally knocks the bottle over and spills the perfume all over her new dress. Convinced he's just ruined any chance of romance, Sam apologizes profusely for his clumsy and very expensive mistake. "I'm so sorry, Jane. I've ruined your new dress." "No, you haven't, Sam," Jane interjects. "Now when I wear this dress at graduation, I'll smell the perfume you gave me and I'll think of you." I know, I was expecting a few ahs. It's a soppy story, really, isn't it? It's a made-up story. It's not for real. I didn't drag that out from Raywin and our past. And it only partially, in fact, barely partially, illustrates what was going on when Mary poured expensive perfume all over Jesus. What's different about my perfume story from John's perfume story is that Sam's expensive perfume was given to show his romantic feelings for Jane. Mary, on the other hand, poured her expensive perfume over Jesus' feet to honour him as the Messiah, the Anointed One, the coming King of Israel. We learn the significance of Mary's actions when Jesus defends her from her critics who thought she'd just done a very stupid and wasteful thing. "Leave her alone. She intended saving this perfume for the day of my burial," he said. "You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me." The perfume Mary poured over Jesus' feet in John's Gospel, but also over his head in Mark's Gospel, would have run all over his clothes, not just his feet. The clothes that Jesus would have worn into his final week. Its beautiful fragrance would have been the last smell that Jesus smelled as he went before the trial, before the Sanhedrin, as his clothes were then taken off and he was whipped, and as he went to the cross. This was the fragrance of this beautiful perfume that Mary had anointed Jesus with. That smell that not only filled the room that they were in at that meal, but would have carried through, would have lingered on Jesus as he wore those clothes that had been drenched in the beautiful perfume. So at perfumer, the name I'm going to give this fragrance that filled the room and saturated the clothes of Jesus that Jesus wore during his final week is this name, Messiah. Messiah, what a great name for a perfume. You can imagine that, couldn't you? Buying a bottle of Messiah perfume. It's a grand name for a perfume, I think, but also a grand name for the one who wore it. It's also the name of the perfume that we wear, or should be wearing, as we carry the scent of Jesus wherever we go, filling the room with his fragrance as we go about our cross-shaped resurrection living, wearing the scent of Jesus on us through our actions, through our words, through our behaviour, through the way we carry ourselves as we interact with other people. The scent, the fragrance, the perfume of Messiah upon us. However, for every fragrance that fills the room, there's always a fume that clears the room. Judas is the one who emits the fume that nearly cleared the room. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages, Judas objected loudly. Good point, Judas. Surely selling the perfume and giving the money to the poor would have been a much more kingdom-minded thing to have done than pouring it all over Jesus' feet. I mean, what good was it going to do then? But Judas wasn't really concerned about the poor, as John explains. Judas did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. And I imagine he would have had eyes on potentially the value of this perfume that he could have sold and pilfered some for himself. As perfumer, the name I'm going to call this fume that was emitted by Judas, a fume that would have cleared the room if it wasn't for Jesus' defense of Mary's actions, is this name: objection. Objection, what an appropriate name for this objectionable fume. Disingenuous objection is the particular form of this objection. Of course, there are other positive forms of objection that people may have, but Judas's wasn't. This was disingenuous. He had ulterior motives for the objection that he was raising to what Mary had just done. This is the kind of objection that Judas raised, and it's not the kind of fume that you want filling your room, is it? So I'm lighting another candle now. This is a lavender candle, this one. You can buy these candles at Massive just down the road on Crankaby Road, should you like to get yourself a scented candle. The setting of this fragrant-filled occasion is a dinner party, a dinner given in Jesus' honour, served by Martha in gratitude for the miracle that Jesus had performed 6 days earlier when he raised her brother Lazarus from the dead. Lazarus was right there at the table with Jesus, part of the celebrations going on. Before the room had been filled so sweetly with the fragrance of the Messiah's perfume, the smell filling the room was the mouth-watering aroma of Middle Eastern food. I kind of imagined, I wondered if it smelt a bit like the meal that Raywin and I had, a Jordanian meal when we went out for dinner with Tim and Angela Stewart when we stopped by to visit them on our final day in Jordan. And we had a wonderful, beautiful smelling meal with them and their family. Hospitality is an important part of Middle Eastern culture. When night falls and work is done for the day, it's hospitality time in the Middle East. Check how many occasions are recorded in the Gospels where Jesus is having a meal. Well, here's another one, another meal that he's to be found at, that he'd been invited to, in fact. A meal with his disciples, with Mary, with Lazarus, and with Martha. Except this wasn't a regular meal they were having together. This was a special hospitality meal in honour of Jesus, held in gratitude for bringing Lazarus back to life. So as perfumer, the name I'm giving this perfume that was served by Martha is holy hospitality. Holy hospitality. What another great name for a perfume, don't you reckon? Holy hospitality. Imagine going and buying a bottle of holy hospitality to buy as a perfume from a perfume store. What a great name for this perfume and for all who enjoy the sweet fragrance, the beautiful aroma of this holy hospitality. You see, everyone who gathers around the meal table of holy hospitality has the opportunity of meeting Jesus there, like we see happening in person in John 12, but also in the sense that Jesus promised that wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in hospitality in my name, there I am with you, he said. Sadly, I think, the fragrance of holy hospitality is a perfume that isn't smelled nearly as often these days in our world today as it was back in the day when Martha, Mary, and Lazarus honoured Jesus by inviting him and his disciples to dinner at their place. And what an occasion it would have been in honour of Jesus as they shared holy hospitality together. When was the last time you served the aroma of holy hospitality at your place, like Martha did? I wonder. John writes, meanwhile, a large crowd of Jews found out that Jesus was there and came not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans to kill Lazarus as well, for on account of him, many of the Jews were going over to Jesus and believing in him. As perfumer, the name I'm giving this fume that was intended to clear the room of Jesus and Lazarus is of opposition. Unlike some parts of the world where there's direct opposition and persecution of those wearing the scent of Jesus Christ upon them, here in New Zealand, I think the opposition is usually a little more subtle than that. Not quite as obvious as direct opposition or direct persecution. But it's there, isn't it? I think I smelled the fume of opposition on this last Good Friday that we've had a few months back, when I turned on the 6 o'clock news to see, hoping to see at least a brief report of some of the different ways that Easter Friday had been celebrated around the country, which usually happens on Easter Friday 6 o'clock news report. But not last Easter. You may remember what the headline news was on last Easter Friday. It was about a scandal over an abuse of power by Arise Church's lead pastor toward their overworked and underpaid interns. And this was the lead story on Good Friday night, where the whole country would have seen it. Now, I'm not saying that this wasn't newsworthy or that pastors who abuse their power shouldn't be held to account, because we should be. But sadly, insecure religious leaders have been giving off this fume long before and after the chief priests stunk the temple out as they attempted to clear the room of Jesus and Lazarus. But the timing of that news release, to me, seemed as if it was deliberately timed for Good Friday, at a time where it would have had peak attention on it and really overrode and displaced any good news about what Easter Friday was really all about, that what we would have expected to be on an Easter Friday news report. And to me, maybe I'm wrong about this, but to me that reeked more than just a little of the fume called opposition. Thankfully, opposition isn't the most powerful scent that fills or clears the room. I'm lighting, the package says, a freesia and jasmine scented candle. To remind us of the third fragrance that fills the room from John 12. John writes, "Now there were some Greeks among those who went up to worship at the festival. They came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee," so he was probably a Greek himself. "They came to him with a request. 'Sir,' they said, 'we would like to see Jesus.' Philip went to tell Andrew. Andrew and Philip in turn told Jesus. You see, a fragrance was in the Jerusalem air that had caught the attention of some of the Greek visitors to Jerusalem for the Passover festival. The city was abuzz with the news that Jesus of Nazareth had recently raised Lazarus from the dead, and that Jesus had just arrived in town riding on a donkey. Everyone was wondering, could this be the day Zechariah's prophecy about the coming king riding on a donkey was being fulfilled? So the Greek visitors to Jerusalem were drawn by this fragrance that filled the Jerusalem air. They were drawn to seek out Jesus, to find him for themselves. What they really wanted to know was, whatever it was that Jesus was offering, was it only for the Jews, or was it for everyone, including them, the Greeks? The answer to their question came in the form of a parable that Jesus told. Listen carefully, Jesus said. Unless a grain of wheat is buried in the ground, dead to the world, it is never any more than a grain of wheat. But if it is buried, it sprouts and produces itself many times over. In the same way, anyone who holds on to life will lose it. But if you let it go, you'll have it forever. Jesus knew his parable had prophetic meaning, not just for his own life that was not far from coming to an end, but also his followers. Yet he also knew that whatever he must soon go through would be to glorify his Father's name. And just then a heavenly voice boomed from heaven. I have glorified your name and will glorify your name, thundered the voice. Jesus continued, and when I am lifted up from the earth, I will lift all people to myself. And then he invited everyone in the crowd, Jews and Greeks, to believe in the light while you have the light, so that you may become children of light. According to John, these were Jesus's last public words before retreating to be with his disciples before going to the cross. And so as perfumer, I'm going to name this fragrance that filled the Jerusalem air, reaching the nostrils of the Greek visitors to Jerusalem and attracting an international crowd around Jesus. I'm naming it Gospel. Gospel, isn't that another great name for a perfume, don't you think? Imagine being able to go and buy a bottle of Gospel perfume. Gospel fragrance had been filling the air ever since Jesus went to the cross and rose from the dead. Gospel fragrance has perfumed Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the Mediterranean, Asia, Europe, Africa, America, and even to the ends of the earth, to Aotearoa, New Zealand, right here. In an Easter camp a long time ago, I first responded to the gospel fragrance and became a child of light. Gospel fragrance fills the room right now if we have nostrils to smell it. Take a deep breath and breathe it in. I'm not yet really smelling these. They're not as strong as I was hoping they'd be. But the scent of Jesus, of the gospel, it is in the air because he's here. The scent of Messiah, the aroma of holy hospitality that we can have together. The sweet perfume of gospel, drawing us to Jesus, who invites everyone in the room to breathe him in, to believe in the light while you have the light, so that you may become children of light. So how about we do that? How about we take in a big breath right now? For real, let's do it. Imagine we're breathing in Jesus, breathing in the Messiah, breathing in holy hospitality, breathing in the gospel. So we breathe in Jesus. And as we breathe Jesus in this morning, let's affirm in our hearts and say it even out loud together. These words. Let's say this together to affirm what we're believing, what we're saying. Follow me if we want to say this. Jesus, I believe you are the light of the world. Therefore, I am a child of light. And we are, if we believe these words, if we breathe to Jesus in, take in these words to heart, believing them for the truth of the gospel, the beautiful scent of the gospel. Let me pray. Jesus, you are Messiah. You are holy hospitality. You are good news for all people. You are the light of the world, and we believe in you. We are children of light. We put on the scent of Messiah, the aroma of holy hospitality, and the sweet perfume of gospel. As we carry you with us into the world, may people be drawn to your light and become children of light because of the sweet smell of your perfume on us. Help us to wear you well. Amen. Worship